What do you do in times of upheaval? What sustains you? When you feel as if you're sailing across a roiling sea towards a place you've never been, where is your terra firma, the firm ground upon which you stand? Since the dawn of time, waters have signified danger and chaos. The ancient Middle Eastern creation stories are all based on taming that chaos. You know ours from Genesis. In the beginning, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep waters. And God said, let the waters be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. Separating the safe, dry land from the chaos, separating what is safe from what is unknown. In our lesson today, Apostle Paul is facing that unknown. It's about the year 50, and he's looking out across a stretch of land between Turkey and the mainland of Greece. He is on his second long journey, moving up through Syria and then across Turkey. By the time this second trip is completed, he will have logged over 3,000 miles, telling his story, telling Jesus' story, forming little communities of people inspired by those life stories. Paul's instincts have told him to continue northward, staying on the Asian side of Turkey, but he has an odd dream that draws him towards Greece. It will be a treacherous trip for Paul across the Mediterranean in a small boat, as it still is. We know that now. Millions of refugees today have tried to make it across those waters between Turkey and Greece, and not all make it. How does Paul decide? When you are making a huge change, when you are crossing over waters, your little boat, so small, on the vast chaos of water, what gives you courage? When your beloved dies, or your relationship ends, when you are fired or retired, when school ends, your money runs out, how do you carry on? When you must summon the energy to cross uncharted waters, move to some unknown place with unknown people, what is your terra firma? And if you have survived such a journey, do you have a story to tell? In June 1972, newspapers across the world carried on their front pages a photograph from the Vietnam War of a young Vietnamese girl running naked down a road, horror on her face, her arms flung wide. Do any of you remember it? Have you seen it since then? She and others in the picture are fleeing a napalm bomb that has just been dropped on the girl's village in South Vietnam. She's naked because she stripped off her clothes. They were on fire, burning her skin. And of course, that's the purpose of napalm, to send down sheets of burning fire, to defoliate and destroy. Tapes made by President Nixon in his White House office later showed that he wondered that day if the June 1972 photo were staged. It was that powerful. But of course, the photo wasn't staged, and 2 days ago, I met that girl. Her name is Kim Phuc, and she is my little brother's age, 52 now. She told her story to a hushed room of people who had gathered because she was working with UNICEF in their worldwide efforts to protect children. I was a guest of Nick Danforth, who grew up as a child in this church. Kim Phuc now tells her story because she wants children saved from what she had to suffer. Kim was 9 years old when the bomb struck. Fire stripped swaths of skin off her back and her arms. A reporter near the scene gave her a drink of water and poured water from his canteen onto her burned back. The photographer who took her picture drove her and other children to a hospital in Saigon where Kim was thought unlikely to survive due to her overwhelming burns. But after 14 months in the hospital and 17 surgeries, including many painful skin grafts, Kim came home. The pain remains with her today, and it was many years before she could even move easily. You see, thick scar tissue had formed on her arms and on her back, and when that thick tissue is there, you can't make the normal stretching movements that our skin allows when it's not burned. She had had a wonderful childhood, she said, before that bomb. She was loved by her family. She was a girl who treasured school and learning. She had so much fun riding her bike. But after the napalm bomb, Kim just wanted to die. If she didn't cover her body, people stared and grimaced. She never felt beautiful as she was growing to be a young woman, never thought she'd marry or have children. And then a second awful thing happened. The communist regime in Vietnam rediscovered Kim when she was about 14 years old, and they removed her from the school and the family that she loved. She became a tool of their propaganda, living proof of vicious American aggression, they said. Kim says she was never without her government minders. After nearly 10 years, Kim was allowed to go back to school, and she studied medicine in Cuba, where she met her husband, also from Vietnam. As they flew from their honeymoon in Moscow back to Cuba, their plane refueled in Canada, and the two got up and walked off the plane and never returned. They defected there in Canada, where they were given asylum and now reside. But for many years, Kim lived there in Canada at the edge of poverty because neither she nor her husband could speak English, and she remained haunted by the experience captured in the photograph. In that time, it was hard for Kim to find her solid terra firma, the firm earth on which she could stand. But today, when you see her and hear her, it's amazing. Kim radiates peace. She is joyful despite the ongoing physical pain. How can this be? What turned things around for her? Kim says it was forgiveness that freed her from her gnawing hatred of those who harmed her, both the Americans and the communists. And when she was 19, she became a Christian, and through those teachings that she read about, with Jesus saying, "Forgive one another," she slowly began to do that, all those who had harmed her on both sides. I asked her, how could it be? You mentioned that in your speech and it only took you 10 seconds, but how do you forgive, especially when that has been done to you? It's not easy, Kim replied. Here is what I did. I thought every day about myself as if I were a cup of black coffee. That was the hatred in my heart, that black coffee, and every day I tried to just pour out a little bit of it. Some days I would have a hard time, but even if it could be a dribble, I would try to pour some of the coffee out. There were times when I thought the cup might be nearly empty, but I found it was full again. So every day I try a little more. Jesus had told me to pray for my enemies. How could I pray for them? But I tried that too. I made a long list of all my enemies. I wrote down their names on a piece of paper, every single one of them, and then every day I prayed for them. Can you imagine that? She asked us. But if I can do it, you can too. I had 3 Ds that I used, she said to me. The first is a desire to forgive. I had to want to. The second D was determination. I could not give up. And the third D was discipline. However I felt, I had to do it every day. I had to think about that cup of coffee, pray for those enemies each day. And then one day, I noticed that my cup was empty. My hatred was gone. Since I learned to forgive, she told the whole audience, I have met the commander of the U.S. airstrikes that day when I was hurt. He told me that he'd been bothered for a long time, and I told him that I forgive him. I've also met with the communist leaders on the other side and said the same thing. When my cup was empty, I then realized I could start to fill it up again. My name given to me as a child means golden happiness, and I hadn't felt that way for a very long time. But with an empty cup, I now had some room to fill it with light and good things. Kim told us there was a second thing that made a difference in her life, and that is she began to think about her blessings, to practice gratitude, learning to appreciate what she had as well as what she'd lost. She stopped asking, why me? In Canada, Kim met the woman who eventually wrote her biography. I asked the biographer, what was it like working with her? When I met her, the woman responded, I was a TV producer on the news show where Kim gave her first interview to the Western press in Canada. Kim was very quiet and withdrawn then, halting English. I saw that the photograph still owned Kim. Kim needed to own the photograph, to use it for goals that she chose. So with the help of this woman who was a producer, someone who was trained to understand the power of visuals and of story, Kim began to see that her story was not only tragedy, but also could become an engine for building support to protect children and for helping those children already traumatized. According to UNICEF, there are 250 million children who live amidst terror today. That's 1 out of every child on the world. Even when they survive the conflict, the stresses the children endure can last a lifetime. Now Kim tells her story, teaching that people can change, our world can change, and she has become terra firma for others, a sign of hope for those who are just trying to hold on in their dark and storm-ravaged times. When Paul made it to the other side of the Mediterranean Sea in Greece, he went to some cities and found that unlike the other places he had been before, there were not always Jewish synagogues where he could begin to preach. So he went outside the city gates, down by the river, where he thought he might find some women praying. There he found Lydia. He began speaking with them, and he told them about the napalm bomb that had been dropped on Jesus, that Paul himself had tried to drop a bomb on Jesus' followers. And despite all that, Paul had been forgiven and was still loved, and had been told that he had a story worth telling. Like Kim, Paul has set out across great distances to share what he'd experienced and discovered: love stronger than hate, forgiveness that can transform. Lydia listened, and intrigued by Paul's story, she invited Paul to stay. Lydia had a business selling purple cloth, and we know that that required a special dye that only rich people could afford then. And because Lydia had wealthy clients, we think that she was rich too, rich enough to support Paul on the next leg of his journey. Paul hadn't known about Lydia when he set off across the waters to Greece. Kim didn't know she'd have a story to inspire others when the napalm bomb first exploded. Often in the midst of our vast, chaotic waters, we have no idea what lies ahead and how we'll survive. That's why we gather in communities like this one, to tell our stories and to hear others' stories. When I cannot imagine a life worth living, I come to hear Paul's story here, and Kim's and yours. You offer me a glass of water to drink, pour water down my burning back, drive me to the hospital, and I can hang on long enough. Then you stumble, and another group of us is here to say, don't let your past own you. Own your own story so it can give you life, can give others life, make all things new. And when our neighbors are weighed down with pain, cry out to us, we say, you're not alone. Your enemies have no power over you. If slowly, slowly you can learn to forgive them. How can we do that? They'll scoff. Well, do you remember the girl in the photo from Vietnam? And then in my own life, the author of the book of Revelation had a dream too, of a new heaven and a new earth where the chaotic sea is no more, where the home of God is among mortals with us. Tell this story, he says, for my words are trustworthy and true. I am making all things new. All that needs to be done has already been done through actions big and small, through your hands. God wipes every tear from their eyes. When you are the one crushed, weary, or mourning, another comes to be with you, even when we can't see it, when we can't feel it. Love present from beginning to end, not in some gauzy future high among the clouds, but now, not up in heaven, but here on earth. That's what Kim Fuchs says. She says she feels like heaven is on earth right now. Here's her quote. Forgiveness made me free from hatred. I still have many scars on my body and severe pain most days, but my heart is cleansed. Napalm is very powerful, but faith, forgiveness, and love are much more powerful. We would not have war at all if everyone could learn how to live with true love and hope and forgiveness. If that little girl in the picture can do it, ask yourself, can you? Terra firma amidst the chaotic waters. Stories worth telling and retelling, hers and Paul's, yours. Amen.